Good morning from Miss Sandra's. Today we're going to speak about being brave and perhaps courageous. And maybe that's kind of linked with risk taking that we've spoken about in the past, but about also pushing yourself beyond your normal boundaries so that you have a more enriched life. Okay. And just while I think of it, it would be great if you would subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the video, and turn on your notifications. Okay, so I decided to do this really as a result of a conversation that I had with somebody who had become quite nervous about doing something that they really wanted to do. And I think sometimes when we feel nervous about something, we actually think we're the only ones that feel like that, and we feel that everybody around us is actually very brave. Now, if we look at what brave actually means, is ready to face and endure a challenge, or perhaps face danger in some way. And if we look at risk, for example, a situation involving exposure to danger. So when we think about danger and discomfort, that's really what's happening when we get quite fearful, because we think, what's going to happen is, this is going to be uncomfortable. So a lot of the time when we feel that we don't want to do something and we're too afraid to do it, it's not because there's a danger of something really happening to us, but because there is this danger, if you like, of us feeling very uncomfortable and nervous. And it's an uncomfortable feeling when we are nervous, and therefore people try to avoid that at all costs. But what that does is it actually restrains what you experience in your life. If you take, for example, I'm actually afraid of heights, and I can be really, really afraid, to the point where I will freeze on the spot in certain situations. But I didn't want to miss. I think actually I went with other people 4 times to Paris, and they went up the Eiffel Tower and I stood at the bottom. And it's this missing out that I don't like, because everybody came down and said what wonderful views it is. And so I don't like that missing out. And so I've now been up the Burj Khalifa. And okay, I wouldn't stand very comfortably right at the window's edge, but I went there and I saw what I needed to see, and I know that I came back safely. But also, it's that discomfort that you sometimes get from putting yourself in a situation where you're quite shy and nervous. And I can remember really, really clearly, and I did tell this lady about this. When I was 16, I actually started a job, and I was working in the centre of London in a travel agency actually. And in that particular job, the boss, the lady that ran the agency, she kept asking me to go and buy teas and coffees and sandwiches for her guests that were visiting. And so I would go and do this, and she would allow me to pay for it out of my own money, and she wasn't actually giving me this back each time, and I was kind of making a note of it. But I was 16 years old, I'd just started work, I had no money really, and so I was doing this on a daily basis, but I did not have the confidence to ask her for that money. Okay, I just didn't have the confidence. And I would go home week after week, day after day, and tell my mum, she still hasn't given it to me. And my mum would say to me, Sandra, just go and ask her. What can she do? She's not going to hurt you. Nobody can kill you. So what is the worst that can happen? You have to go and ask her. And I still couldn't. And after I'd been there for the first month, and after the first month she didn't pay me my salary, then I would go home day after day and say to my mum, she hasn't paid me yet, mum. My mum says, Sandra, You know, why are you doing this? Just ask her, it's okay. And it was so difficult for me at that time, so difficult, until in the end, I think I'd been there for 2 months and hadn't been paid. And in the end, I actually eventually asked her, and it kind of went from there. So to think that I was in that kind of situation, and you know, however many years later, would have been standing as a senior leader in school on a stage speaking to hundreds of parents. It is possible to change. It's absolutely possible to change. But I think what you have to do is you have to be what I call myself nosy. I want to know so much that it actually makes me put myself in difficult situations. And sometimes we just have to do that, because, for example, if you put yourself in a difficult situation, you may feel embarrassed for maybe half an hour, maybe 1 hour or something like that. But nothing awful is going to happen to you. And gradually you get rid of some of that fear, and then you're opening up a whole new world for yourself, a whole new world. And you know, this is what's important, that you just little by little decide that, okay, I'm afraid of this, but I am going to do it, okay? And I was reading about other people recently as well that were almost saying the same as myself. There are not many people that put themselves out there doing things in front of others that are not nervous. But because they push themselves to, you know, open up that borderline, if you like, they can stretch it a little bit further each time. To be honest, you know, even completing a video blog is quite nerve-wracking, okay? And certainly the first time I did it was very nerve-wracking. You are potentially opening yourself up to, you know, lots and lots of viewers, and you could in fact make a fool of yourself. But if I do, what's the worst that can happen? But if I don't and it goes okay, then I've actually opened up a new avenue to speak to people, and hopefully people will find the videos interesting. So I've opened something up instead of just closed it down, said, no, I can't do it. Okay, so, you know, I even jotted down a few things that, that I've kind of done that were quite nerve-wracking at the time, but I've done them and just stretched myself that little bit far. Okay, so within my job, you know, when there's been a promotion available, I've kind of thought, is it for me, is it not? And I could just sort of sit and think, no, I don't have the skill set. But if you do, don't knock yourself down, put yourself forward for something. And the least, you know, the worst that can happen is that somebody can tell you, okay, you're not ready for this job at the moment. This is why we felt you weren't ready. And that gives you something to move on with. Whereas if you don't go for these things, then you will never know. Would I have got that job? Maybe I wouldn't. And I actually remember, and this was an important turning point, I think, for me. I remember in my life being told by somebody very close to me at the time that I'd been for an interview and I didn't get the job. And this person said to me, oh, you didn't get the job? That must be awful. I've never failed at anything. And it made me think, so I'm a failure because I didn't get the job. And I really thought about it, because I hadn't really at that time thought of myself as a failure for not getting the job. So I really looked at it and analysed it and realised that actually this person would only ever put themselves forward for things that they felt very sure they would get. Okay, so they were perhaps overqualified for, okay, rather than pushing themselves to the limits of their abilities. Okay, and I think that was the difference. Okay, so for example, two people are here, okay, in their capability and ability for a job, okay. One's pushing themselves for a job that's going to take them up slightly, and one's pushing themselves for a job here. This one's going to appear much more successful because, you know, they're playing very safe, and sometimes you just have to take yourself a little bit further, because there is a lot of psychological research as well that we actually grow into the positions that we take on. So even, you know, if we're just about there, we've got the ability and we've got many of the skills, once you take on that position, then you will take on that persona, you will take on everything that comes with it, okay? So don't hold yourself back. And certainly, you know, when you get to 60, as I am, you kind of, you start to reflect on life, and you think about, are there regrets, are there not? And everybody always says the old cliche, you know, never have regrets, you know, but it really is a real thing, you know. Don't get to that age and think, oh, I wish I'd have done that, because I can honestly say there are not many things. There are a few things that I would like to have done more. There just hasn't been the time to do them all. But you know, don't get to an age and be looking back and thinking you wish you'd have tried something, because honestly, nothing's going to happen to you if you try it and it doesn't work first time now. Okay, so I think they're my main, they're the main things I'd like to say. And speak to somebody else. If you want to do something and you are a bit nervous, speak to somebody else, get their buy-in, but do it. Okay, just say to yourself, okay, I'm going to do this. Okay, I would say, I'm going to do this, Sandra. What's the worst that can happen? And I can hear my mum's voice in my head. What is the worst that can happen, Sandra? You know, just go and ask, go and say, go and do, go and try. Okay, so I think that's really important. Okay, please, if you have enjoyed watching the video, I'd love to hear from you. Please turn on the notifications and subscribe. And if you do have any comments or any other requests for particular subjects, I'd be more than happy to try to cover them. You know, there's a couple of subjects that I have now covered as a result of people wanting to hear what I have to say on it. So I think this is really, really important that I am covering things that you want to hear about. Thank you very much and have a great day.